As we move forward, we come across Sir Philip Sidney. Now remember, I told you right from the start we've already covered Sidney's critical role in Renaissance criticism in detail. You'll find his defense of poesy, the PYQs, PDFs, and even last-minute revision materials already in your app. So here, let's shift our focus a little to his poetic career and his remarkable life as a courtier and soldier. Sidney was born in Kent in 1554. He studied at Shrewsbury and Oxford, but instead of finishing a degree, he travelled widely across Europe, soaking in the humanist culture of his time. By 1575, he was back in England, serving as cupbearer to Queen Elizabeth. Soon after, in 1577, he was sent as ambassador to Germany. Politically, he is remembered for opposing Elizabeth's marriage to the French heir, but literarily, here's where his legacy shines. He wasn't just a poet, he was a patron of the arts and even encouraged Edmund Spenser in his career. Now, his best-known literary work is the sonnet sequence Astrophel and Stella, and this was asked in exam. Published after his death, this collection foreshadows the Shakespearean sonnet form again. Asked in exam and established Sidney as one of the first great sonneteers in English. Alongside it, he wrote the prose romance Arcadia. It was also asked in exam, a sprawling, heroic tale blending love, politics and adventure, which became immensely popular in Elizabethan England. Of course, his defense of poesy, almost every time you get questions from apology in exam, it is his critical masterpiece. We've studied that already. What's important to remember is that he did not publish any of these works during his lifetime. They only came out posthumously, yet they secured his reputation for centuries. Sidney's life ended tragically young. In 1585, he was appointed governor of the Dutch town of Flushing. The next year, during the Battle of Zutphen, he was shot in the thigh. Infection set in and he died of gangrene at just 31. His death became legendary not only because it was avoidable, but because it was marked by nobility. When offered water while dying, Sidney gave it to another wounded soldier, saying, "Thy necessity is yet greater than mine." And this was asked in exam. That one moment summed up his chivalric, selfless spirit. He died in 1586, and in 1587 he was buried at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Let's turn to one of the most ambitious works of Elizabethan prose, Sir Philip Sidney's Arcadia, also known as the Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia. Written towards the end of the 16th century, this was asked in exam. It stands as a key example of the Elizabethan pastoral romance. The setting is Arcadia, an imagined fairyland of beauty and idealism, where shepherd boys graze their cattle, again asked in exam. But beneath the surface of pastoral simplicity, Sidney weaves a complex tale of love, disguise, and mistaken desire. The central figures are Duke Basilius, his wife Ganetia, and their daughters Pamela and Philoclea. Well, asked in exam. Into their world arrive two princes, Musidorus and Pyrocles, who promptly fall in love with the princesses. To win access, they disguise themselves. Musidorus as a lady, Pyrocles as a shepherd. You can already sense the complications coming. Things turn topsy-turvy when even the king and queen become entangled. Basilius is attracted to Musidorus in disguise, while Ganetia seeks to win his heart. Meanwhile, Pyrocles' bravery eventually secures freedom for the princesses. In the end, Musidorus flees with Pamela and the web of entanglements resolves. Sidney actually wrote two versions, the old Arcadia and the new Arcadia, and both of these versions were asked in exam. The work was deeply influenced by Jorge de Montemayor's Spanish romance Diana, recently asked in exam, but Sidney expanded it into something far more ambitious, blending romance, politics, and philosophy. Critics, however, were divided. William Hazlitt dismissed Arcadia as one of the greatest monuments of the abuse of intellectual power upon record. Again, asked in exam. T.S. Eliot went further, calling it a monument of dullness. Again, asked in exam. Yet, Others such as Charles Lamb and Virginia Woolf admired it, showing how reception can swing wildly across time. Its influence, though, is undeniable. Shakespeare borrowed the Gloucester subplot of King Lear from Arcadia. This was asked in exam. The Samuel Richardson took the name Pamela for his famous novel, again asked in exam. And Sidney's highly artificial style, full of conceits and elaborate imagery, was often compared to John Lyly's Euphues. For example, Sidney describes cool wine laughing with joy as it nears a lady's lips, or water drops slipping down a lady's body as though weeping in sorrow. Even clothes, when worn by princesses, are described as glad. Now let's move to one of the finest Elizabethan sonnet sequences, Sir Philip Sidney's Astrophel and Stella. This is a cornerstone of Renaissance poetry, and yes, it's been asked in exams multiple times. Sidney wrote it around 1582, and this date was asked in exam, though it wasn't published until 1591 after his death. The sequence consists of 108 sonnets and 11 interspersed songs. These numbers were asked in exam. Just pause and take that in over 100 poems weaving together love, passion and reason. Who are the characters? Astrophel is Sidney himself, while Stella, whose name literally means star, represents his beloved Penelope Devereux, and this too was asked in exam. And the meaning of Astrophel? It translates as star lover, again asked in exam. Already the symbolism is written into their names, poet and star, lover and light. The sonnets trace Astrophel's struggle with unrequited love. He expresses his longing, his frustration and his emotional battles as passion collides with reason. Again and again he is torn between desire for Stella and recognition that reason must prevail. In the end, Astrophel chooses to abandon his pursuit, turning instead toward a life of public duty. Think of it this way, the sequence is both intensely personal and deeply philosophical. Sidney is not just writing about his own feelings, but about the eternal conflict between reason and passion, duty and desire. The work also sparked a literary trend. After its success, writing sonnet sequences became a vogue in Elizabethan England. And here's another exam anchor. Edmund Spenser himself wrote an elegy called Astrophel in memory of Sidney, asked in exam. So, here are the key points to lock in. Elizabethan sonnet sequence, asked in exam, written in 1582, published 1591, 108 sonnets with 11 songs. Asked in exam, Astrophel as Sidney, Stella as his star. Asked in exam, the themes of love versus reason, and the influence that launched a whole era of sonneteering.